Hello and welcome to this edition of Raisina Dialogue 2021 and to this very interesting session which we have titled Waters of Growth Towards an Arabian Sea Community. At a time when the idea of Indo-Pacific has taken center stage in global discourse, exemplified by the discussion even during this iteration of the Raisina Dialogue, it is often forgotten that in India's conception of the Indo-Pacific, the Arabian Sea is the critical anchor. States bordering the Arabian Sea, of course, straddle the East and the West, and recent developments, whether it is in terms of great power relationships, whether it is in terms of the pandemic that we are all facing, whether in terms of the future of energy, whether it is in terms of the economic revival that the world is looking for, they have allowed for a new possibility to emerge. One that envisions a new role for the region, of new partnerships, of new engagements, of new dialogues that can be made possible, both for shared prosperity, for shared security, and for shared development in the region. And to discuss this, we have a great panel of some of the finest thinkers and policy practitioners in the region with us today. We have Aakanksha Tangri, a founder and editor of Reset from the UAE, where her publication examines a range of issues including inclusion, gender, education, mental health, and others, and so great connect to the youth of the region and beyond. We have with us Majed Al-Ansari, president of Qatar International Academy for Security Studies. We have Kwame Owino, chief executive officer, Institute of Economic Affairs, Kenya. And we have with us Aaditya Thackeray, Minister of Tourism and Environment, Government of Maharashtra with us. So we have a panel, as you can see, young, dynamic policy practitioners, policy thinkers, and dwelling on a range of issues, dabbling on a range of issues across this maritime space. So greetings and welcome to you all. There is lots to discuss today, from great power politics, institutional fragmentation, the role of demographic dividend, the new normative order that is being created, the role of the maritime space, and I will come to you one by one. Let me start with Majed Al-Ansari. Majed, I come to you first because what is happening in the world today in terms of great power contestation is as if we are back to square one in terms of looking at the world through the great power politics prism. It is at its highest. Countries are openly defining themselves in contestation vis-a-vis the other, and there is a great degree of contestation both in political terms as well as in economic terms, which is quite new if you look at the last 2 or 3 decades. So how do you, sitting at the very heart of the Middle East, when you look at the Arabian Sea community, when you look at the potential that exists there, understand and underscore the role of great power politics, both in terms of its disruptive effect as well as in terms of some of the major contribution that perhaps great power coordination and cooperation can do when it comes to building this community from bottom up? Majed.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think for many years now, international relations experts have been talking about the new trend in international relations, which is the move toward the multipolar world, and I think we started taking that as a given. We don't even consider, a resurgence or reemergence of a bipolar world in a different capacity than it was before. And for that reason, we've always been talking about the new emerging powers, the middle powers, and how that is affecting the global south, and how the global south is supposed to rise again as a different, in a different power mechanism. But what we have seen for the past couple of years, as you have rightly pointed in your question, is a resurgence of great power's role in the region in a different capacity than it used to be in the past couple of decades. Since the 1990s, we've seen the unipolarity of the United States hegemonize international relations in a way that created some kind of order around global, regional, and local disputes, with all middle powers basically either trying to fend off US influence or attempting to bring in the US into regional and local disputes. What we are seeing now is a different mechanism, whereby the United States is fending off the expansion in the void it has created in the past 10 years. since the beginning of this, since 2010, we have seen how the United States have, at least in the Middle East context and in the Arabian Sea context, have started pulling out from the major conflicts in the region. And that pulling out has meant that local powers and regional powers had to play a different role than it was expected of them, whether it be Pakistan, India, whether it be Palestine, Israel, whether it be even up to South Korea and North Korea. We have seen these players change dynamics when it comes to how they are going to deal with the dispute and how they are dealing with the disputes as they go along. And this created many more disputes, post the Arab Spring, for example, in the Arab world, the Iranian GCC schism, and the GCC rift that took place in 2017. In all these crises, the United States took a back seat, almost in comparison to its usual role in the region, where all these powers would actually go back to the US one way or the other, positively or negatively, to end or to mitigate the conflict. In our part of the world now, one reality which we need to discuss is how long can this part of the world be considered the break between East and West, and the connection between East and West? And what does that mean for the long-term alliances of the countries of this region? Sadly, since the inception of the statehood in this part of the world, starting with the 1940s in India to the east and ending with the 1970s in the GCC region, we have seen these states being either dependent fully on external powers or at least uncooperative with its direct surroundings. So if we are talking about India, Iran, Pakistan, the GCC states, Yemen, Iraq, we are looking at countries that at most did not work together towards a common goal unless they were faced with a common threat. What we are seeing in the next phase now is that the common threat that, for example, Iran meant for the GCC, and the common threat that kind of mitigated the presence of different international players in the region, it's changing very rapidly, and countries in this region are having to look inwards towards solutions to their issues and to their crises. In the GCC issue, for example, the GCC rift, we have seen that the United States was unable to mitigate the crisis, unable to help end the crisis, and that the regional players were in a bit of a dismay in what to do with this crisis. Iran was trying to make use of it, Iraq was trying to stay out of it, Turkey was making use of it, and even countries like India and Pakistan participated fully in some kind of talks one way or the other to try to find an end to the crisis. What this means is that now we have to start talking about a community in this part of the world that reflects better the interests of the countries of this region without looking only at international powers and at global superpowers as the policemen of the region. We have seen this now starting to happen during the past couple of years. However, I'm not very optimistic that the countries of in this region actually can work together for many reasons. One main reason, of course, is a great difference in the alliance maps, the global alliance maps of these countries. You have countries that are looking more towards the east. You have countries that are looking more towards the west. Some countries with alliances with Russia, others with alliances with the United States. And these alliances are entrenched in the foreign policies of these countries in a way that is very difficult to imagine the foreign policy of these countries without looking at the foreign policies of the United States and Russia and China and other players. Also, the sheer difference in size between these two countries. You cannot compare a country like Qatar, for example, to a mega state like India. And this means a lot when it comes to foreign policy, but also when it comes to economy and when it comes to alliances in the region. There is not a good balance between these states when it comes to size and geopolitical influence for them to act as, in common ground, as equals in a general setting. So it's a bit different, for example, than the situation in Europe, where you had at least 3 or 4 states that are the main drivers of European unity, the main drivers of European foreign policy, and other states following according to their alliances within the framework of these 3 or 4 or 5 big states. In this setting, in the Arabian Sea setting, you have all sizes of countries, but also all sizes of geopolitical influence. So you have a small country like Qatar or Kuwait that have a geopolitical importance in the Arab world that supersedes some big countries in the region without naming names. You have the stability factor. The stability factor is very important because some of the countries in this part of the world can be classified as either failed states or at least fragile states. And these states cannot play a very good role in cooperation in building a new community, in regional community in the world without them having the strong central government, the strong national unity that is needed for them to play that role externally. Also,
thank you,
another.
Majed, we'll come to this part in the second round, because I wanted to touch upon some of the things that you have said and maybe bring in others who can respond to some of those issues. In particular, I think I'll come to Kwame. Kwame, you've heard Majed in terms of if you're looking at it from a strategic perspective, the complexity that it envisions, both in terms of alliances, both in terms of relationships, situate the region right in the mix of some of those tensions. But if you're looking at it from an African perspective, right, where Africa is now increasingly being looked at as a center of global growth, potential growth going forward. Some of the African nations have done extremely well in the last decade, and there is great hope that they would lead the economic recovery post COVID-19. So when you look at it from sitting in Africa and you look at the Arabian Sea community or potential for this community, what sort of economic, trade and connectivity linkages do you envision from your continent's perspective? Because this is again a community that has quite a great expanse of interests and quite great degree of complexity, as Majed was highlighting.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it's true that there's a connection, of course, of the Eastern African seaboard to the Arabian Sea, and obviously, in our view, to the larger Indian Ocean, as you can. So there's geographically, I think its significance and its salience in Africa's growth is becoming more pronounced. For this reason, that at the beginning of this year, of course, finally, the African countries, all 53 of them, consolidated the African Continental Free Trade Area. Most of it assumes, obviously, improved trade within the African continent. And many African countries, despite the COVID emergency, were growing at some, basically. Among the top 10 countries, fastest growing countries before COVID came, 5 of them were in Africa, of which 4 were actually Eastern African countries on that same strategic zone that we talk about. So both exports, which basically most of the development paradigms are predicated on exports. And so exports and connecting to global value chains mean, as the Suez Canal problem a couple of weeks back told us, the significance of shipping lines and maritime trade, just speaks for itself. So basically, straight along those lines, and the institutional arrangements are actually not as strong as they should be, and I think that's going to become part of the agenda, which we at the Institute of Economic Affairs hope to alert other people to. But I think a discussion such as this just confirms to us that there's need for greater coordination. So you understand, for instance, that the countries of the eastern seaboard of Africa tend to have very long coastlines, but at the same time, for that reason, almost every country of the seaboard of Africa is actually building a new port, whether military one, but mostly for just expanding maritime trade. So obviously the refurbishment of these ports itself has signaled about the recognition that maritime trade is going to be important. Some other forms of cooperation around security are also significant. And I think here there's scope for security and institutions connecting the Arabian side all the way back to the Indian side. So that's a very long coastline. Sometimes faces bottlenecks, but also security problems which require coordination. As it is right now, most of that security is underpinned on that seaboard by Chinese, French, British, and American. And over time, I think the call for sovereignty or proximity for these countries is going to rise. I see it. not necessarily for just nationalistic purposes, but basically part of actually improving everybody's stakes in managing that critical sea line, critical base. So I see both Africa's imperatives, and the Eastern African countries, obviously, and the connection to the Arabian world, where most of the energy resources come from. So securing those lines is part of securing global commerce. And if some African countries are going to contribute, I think some are going to contribute, definitely. Not all of them, because of policies vary, and some of them are not doing too well. Then it necessarily means that this seaboard is going to actually have a great expansion in trade, volumes of travel, obviously sea safety, and all those other things are all going to come together. So a lot of things are coming together in a way that suggests that, yes, I think the Arabian Peninsula, the Arabian Sea, part of the Indian Ocean, and obviously the East African seaboard would have to need some coordination around international institutions, building local capacity, but at the same time, the significance to global trade is going to rise markedly. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent, Kwame. And I would take this opportunity to bring Aakanksha in. Aakanksha, you heard both of these gentlemen, and they have, in their own ways, talked about connectivities, linkages, capacity building, and institutionalization. And so I have two sets of questions for you, since your work is on gender, education, inclusion, and issues of mental health. How do you see two things? One, how do you see Industry 4.0 challenging us to understand this differently, to understand the requirements of contemporary youth differently? And how do we bring youth of today into this conversation? Right? We are talking of geopolitical rivalries, we are talking of economic imperatives, but how do we bring in youth, which is such an important element here in terms of both reviving our old connections as well as mapping out the future? How do we bring that into this conversation at a time when Industry 4.0 is really challenging us to think very, very differently about the future of work and the entire paradigm of employment?
I think this can be done through investing in the youth, creating and providing more opportunities for them to access across the creative industries, and encouraging innovation in schools, universities, and through public-private partnerships, opportunities to upskill and grow, and by creating more cultural dialogues. So here I'm emphasizing on soft power. Many Gulf countries attract Indian students for higher education, not only for its accessible geography and career opportunities and close historical ties, but also because you have international campuses such as NYU Abu Dhabi, London Business School in Dubai, Georgetown University in Qatar. So within the UAE, if you look specifically, it has embraced creativity as the heartbeat shaping everyday life. And as we know, if you look at the pandemic, it's the marriage of key industries with creative industries that have thrived. So we, transform these into creative hubs to invest in human capital for arts, design, literature. I can give you an example. I work out of Dubai and Mumbai. So for me, Al Sarkal Avenue here is a cultural district that plays a host to homegrown SMEs across creative industries, has cafes, co-working spaces where you meet people from all across the Gulf. You meet entrepreneurs from India who are setting up spaces here. When I go out to work in Mumbai, I know that I'm going to be working out of Kalahora, or I'm going to go to the Ministry of New or Soho House. And the people I meet there, the young Indians I meet there, they have so much in common with the diaspora here, with the Arab youth here. And let's not forget that this part of the world has the largest youth population, and they want change, and they want access to opportunities, and they want their leaders to deliver it across quality education, access to capital, prioritizing well-being, if you look at the pandemic. So I think for while the other two panelists have talked about economic and other ties, I'm going to still emphasize on soft power, because soft power does lead to then more tourism, more trade, more other partnerships on the economic front as well.
Thank you, Aakanksha. And Aaditya, there you heard it, that the youth wants the leaders to deliver, and you are our, the youth leader, young leader You are serving, you are governing one of the most important Indian states. How do you envision Mumbai's role in that space? In Mumbai, I'm asking particularly because Mumbai has the potential to become the financial gateway almost to the Arabian Sea community, or become a front for that larger idea. But how ambitious we can be about this? Clearly, there are some limitations, but do you or young leadership or the government of Maharashtra, for example, has a vision for thinking beyond just the Indian landscape, connecting Maharashtra, the entire seaboard, to the larger Arabian Sea community? Are we beginning to think in that direction, or are we still not comfortable yet with this idea? Are we still at the very beginning, or have we started doing some of the groundwork?
No, I think firstly, it's a fantastic panel to be a part of, because essentially, when we speak about Arabian Sea communities, I think it's one of the most ambitious and complex communities that we could, come out of and start building. Because essentially, the whole crescent, if you see, you've got India, you've got countries of the West Asia, or as the world calls it, Middle East, and then the whole question of, even if it extends to the Indian Ocean, whether we connect with Africa and the larger part of Africa, the whole coastline that is facing towards us. I think that is very important. In terms of Mumbai or Maharashtra participating as a larger part or playing a larger role in our connect with the Arabian Sea community, I think it's, of course, a very, very crucial moment, because for us, if you see historically, we've always been a part of this community. As the Malla coastline, as the Konkan coastline, we've always received trade routes from the West, and anything that came from the West, be it from the Cape of Good Hope, and after when the Suez Canal opened up, we've always been one of those major ports where, you've got people landing, you've got goods landing, you've got cargo coming in. One of the most crucial things is what we are developing as a country and as a state for these trade ties, these commercial ties, and ties of aspiration and hope to really grow. Because when we speak about our century today, it's not just going to be trade and commerce. Like Aakanksha really said, it's about what all of us want today. And beyond just the infrastructure, for example, if you ask me what are we doing to build a community of growth out here, yes, there is the Delhi-Mumbai corridor that's happening through the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust. You also have the DPT that's already here. We've increased the traffic out here. You also have the Mumbai-Bengaluru corridor that's being built, and you already have the Golden Quadrangle. So infrastructure-wise, yes, we have. I think the larger question that comes in really is for all of us, be it Maharashtra, be it Kerala, be it Gujarat, to play a role, or be it any of the other countries in this crescent of the Arabian Sea playing a role. One of the questions and debates that's always been in the offing is, do we really create an institution with all of us participating in it? I think that is really crucial, because if you see, there is a common thread for a community to build always. The European Union had always this common thread of political borders and the hope and need for a peaceful coexistence. I think we need to find our common thread within this community. I think if it is peace and prosperity, be it after COVID times, because look, we're always going to have complexities. We have, you have probably one of the largest population set living in this area, in this whole crescent. You also have the youngest population set living in this area. You have probably a huge amount of with population that comes in. You've got malnutrition, you've got poverty, you've got disease, but there is also an opportunity to break through and come forward from this. And that is what our aspiration should be, really, standard of life. What is really going to be also a challenge moving further, and I'm going to say challenge because, of course, I could pitch in something only hopeful, but I think we also need to see where we're stepping into and then move further. And we must move further. Essentially, when we look at our history, we've had proper empires out here, huge empires really at the peak of their glory. That sort of builds a sense of pride, hubris. That is somewhere we need to, build on our past, which we shared and not which divided us. We also have the birthplace of so many religions out here. How do we coexist? How do we build on further? I think how do we take the best from all of it is what is needed, and a better understanding of each other, because all of us, as this whole crescent that we have different political systems, have different cultures of living, and have different judicial systems, different regulations. Now, what is really crucial out here, like in the NATO, you have a defense security that is really common to us. For this entire region, be it for Maharashtra, be it for Gujarat, be it for Qatar, be it for UAE, I think, or even for Kenya, I think what will be really essential to get into any age of peace and prosperity would be energy security, food security, and how we give dignity to a life, to the citizens of a life. I think, the life of our citizens that live in our countries. I think that is really important. And that is where all of us, as leading states, leading cities, be it financial capitals, capitals of transport, tourism, industry, trade, commerce, health, education, all of us can come together through a certain mechanism and put this going.
Thanks, Aditya. Majed, I think Aditya mentioned history and culture and the past, which often has been talked about. I think this is a region that is almost overburdened by history. There is history everywhere you look at. History often complicates things for us at times. History makes it difficult for us to move forward. So I think the challenge, both Aakanksha talked about this, Aaditya talked about this, is this issue of tapping into the demographic dividend that we have. We often talk about it, but what are we doing to tap into it? Now the question therefore is, can we move beyond, linkages of history? We can talk about it in a positive manner, but I think the need is, how do we move beyond this to create economic and strategic partnerships that are relevant to our times, that are relevant to 21st century, right? We often talk about, whether it's India and the Middle East, India and Africa, there is a lot of emphasis on history, historical ties, which are important in their own right. But I think we are also seeing a generation that is moving away from it, that wants our leaders to talk about here and now, today's challenges. What are we doing about contemporary challenges? And I think how do we then take those historical linkages and build strategic partnerships of 21st century? What are some of the avenues available from your perspective?
So history will always be there, as you rightly said. It will always be a factor in building the relations, especially between societies and between intelligentsias and between even economic organizations. History will always maintain its role as a driving force sometimes and as an obstacle to cooperation. However, I think it's very important in this time and with the changes, geopolitical and global changes that are going on around us, is to consider how can the countries in this part of the world come together, not from the perspective of religion, culture, and history alone, but from the perspective of very pragmatic, security-based economic relations that are based on protecting the states and the maritime movement to make sure that our livelihoods in this part of the world are not tarnished by historical conflicts, by political conflicts, or by regional conflicts. One very important realization we need to have is that mostly all the countries surrounding the Arabian Sea are almost fully dependent on the maritime trade one way or the other. When it comes to the GCC countries, it's exporting our raw materials. Same could go for Kenya and Somalia and the African countries. For maritime trade for India and Pakistan is very important in their economic national models. And therefore, the need to protect maritime trade, the need to protect this sea, basically, and our ports in it, and to make it work together rather than compete against each other in a way that would make us the center of international maritime trade, is very important in developing our states further. And there are a lot of issues that we need to handle together. No one state can tackle these issues on its own. Piracy, for example, terrorism in the sea, the environmental issues regarding maritime trade, and the logistics of maritime trade, the ports and the receiving end locations. All these issues can only be tackled if there is a genuine interest in making it a full circle, a full supply chain, a circle that would make sure that all of the interests of the countries involved will happen. I don't think it would be difficult for these countries to sit down together on a governmental and non-governmental level and to identify the main security threats that we face together in this, in this sea, and how we can tackle them politically, economically, and even socially and culturally, in a way to make sure that we have the best interest of our countries at heart. Another issue here is I want to touch again on the cultural side of it. these countries are mostly traditional. They are the birthplace of many religions and are conservative in many respects when it comes to social settings. And they house, as our colleague rightly mentioned, one of the biggest populations of youth in the world. And these factors need to work together. Because we as countries and as societies and as individuals, we need to work together in a way to make sure that this is a reason for us to come together. We are a traditional hub internationally that is full of youth and young people. We need to make sure that there is no traction between these two attributes, but also that internationally we speak with one voice when it comes to the virtues of conservatism, if needed, and the virtues of youthful societies and how they are to operate in today's world.
Yeah, very, very important point, and I'll ask Aakanksha to respond to it. But before I go to Aakanksha, Kwame, we have just talked about geopolitics, and you had touched upon earlier in your intervention on how the economic linkages have to be remodeled given the contemporary times. The question that I had for you was, we are looking at a period of great economic uncertainty. And there is rising protectionism, there is economic nationalism which is growing across the world. In fact, what is interesting is that those countries that at one point used to be champions of globalization are now cautioning us against globalization. So the question, for a continent like Africa, for African nations, and for Asian countries and countries in the Middle East, which have benefited from economic interdependence and economic globalization. Can we, can we look at a possibility where African nations and others will push back against, this anti-globalization narrative, because clearly that is not in their interest. But there is a certain developed world ideology that is taking over. Do we have it in us? Can we create those institutional frameworks to do that? Or should we be doing that? I mean, there is a possibility perhaps that we are also looking at, ourselves, we are looking at more and more inwards. Is that possibility going to come and reshape the way we engage with the global economic order? But I think I asked this question to you in particular because Africa is, as we discussed in our last intervention, Africa is going to play such an important role in crafting the global economic order. So what role do we see in this particular question as far as Africa is concerned, both in mobilizing African nations as well as in mobilizing the wider Arabian Sea community?
All right, thanks. Hashim, you said a second time that Africa is going to determine the global economic order, and that will be seen by history. I think over time it will be, it's empirically, it's an empirical question. However, for Africa to determine that order means it would have to be a continent with, with a diplomatic ethos that actually encourage global cooperation. And it's not the same for all 54 African countries. I think the domestic politics in many countries have some people who actually want to push back for whatever reasons. And you're right as well that the global shock has led to there is the currency of the idea that self-sufficiency is necessarily an important one. I think the pushback came from the fact that the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has just been published, just been entered into and been a plan of a long time, for decades, suggests that this continent is prepared for that. Also, by the fact that many African professionals are actually taking roles in global institutions, no less the World Trade Organization. So obviously, I think Africa needs to give a face of yes, that because the development imperatives for African countries generally would require an expansion in global connections. So it will be self-defeating for African countries to actually do that. Now, whether they'll stick their necks out, some countries would. I think Kenya's economic diplomacy posture suggests that it still thinks that globalization is an essential. Obviously, institutions have to be strengthened, and specifically institutions strengthened, and low-income and actually middle-income countries, Kenya, India, and a few countries, obviously in the Middle East, as we call it, or West Asia, also will actually have to be hard in global institutions. Managing global commons as well, as you understand right now, everybody's concerned about global warming and obviously what it means, climate change, and what it means for international relations. So bringing an agenda, I think, is important, and it will have to be a change in posture beyond just simply. For a long time, many African countries and developing countries had the view that they were obstructionist, which is you go to global institutions and all you do is say, look, we don't like this, but without an alternative agenda. So developing an alternative agenda and placing it globally for everybody to dissect and actually see what comes in and what the real connections, the real concerns of individual countries would be a positive thing for me. So my thinking is it's a mixed picture so far. Some countries will do that well. Other countries, for domestic policy reasons, obviously. In domestic politics, blaming foreigners always works, right? If there's a shock, blaming foreigners is useful because then it allows people to rally with each other. But I think Africa's youth, if I may speak for them, have the view that posturing globally is one of the things that their governments should do, even if, of course, there's also expectations that governments will have to do more. So I am very, very hopeful. I'm extremely hopeful that the crescent that we're talking about from India coming down to Western Asia and all the way to the north, to the northeast and the eastern seaboard of Africa will continue to actually support the strengthening of global institutions and obviously placing more people from developing countries in positions where they may influence that force going forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Swami. You make an excellent point about leadership and narrative, because this has been also a problem when India started off. India was also seen this perpetual naysayer. It always says no, but where is an alternative? What is the alternative framework? And I think we have seen a transition happening where India is now saying that we are not only willing to say no and push back, but we are also willing to offer some alternatives. So I think eventually this will also be what Africa will have to do because of its own necessities. But I think that's an important point again that links this Arabian Sea community in terms of both being the naysayer and then offering an alternative, which I think the community as a whole will have to come up with alternatives. There is no alternative to offering alternatives, I would say, in that sense, given where the world is moving. But Aakanksha, this point about youth has come up a lot, and you touched upon it, and Majed in his previous remarks touched upon culture. Cultural engagement and how important that is in terms of both revitalizing the conversation amongst disparate actors that may have different politics, different kinds of worldviews, but culturally they would seem more connected because there is a similar set of value systems perhaps that operates, and I think he touched upon some of them, and I think that would be important to consider for the Arabian Sea community as a whole. But when you are looking at it from your point of view, you have worked on this in this space for a while. It goes without saying that there is a need for greater cultural dialogue. But have we been able to create some of those institutions that cater to this dialogue? You said in your last intervention that there is a great degree of affinity, right, between what is happening to the Arab youth, and when you come to and work in Mumbai, for example, you see similar aspirations, similar reflections. But have you been able to mobilize them in a way that yields us some dividends? Or are we still not talking to each other in that landscape, in that cultural landscape, which perhaps connects us much more organically and which would allow this conversation to become much more bottom-up than top-down?
So I know that the panelists before me talked about the youth and the challenges they face, but here again I'd like to reiterate that youth in the Arabian Sea community, the urban youth at least, are more similar than they are different. And recent research also reiterates that. Pew recently found that Gen Z aligns a lot more with millennials on their worldview, and the pandemic has further amplified their need to bring about positive change in their communities. And to your other point, Gulf countries and India share historically close ties, and there's always been a lot of synergies and overlap of interest between the youth. However, more emphasis on soft power is always welcome. I think it's about realizing the full potential of the relationship across all levels, from organic to the highest levels. There's no limit to which these ties can be strengthened, whether it's through youth exchanges, dialogues such as this one, more opportunities for collaboration through partnerships between universities and schools, through initiatives like the Youth Hub here in Dubai, which creates and offers an environment and access to resources for young people to innovate and network. I know that the Dharavi Dream Project in Mumbai does a lot of work on educating the youth on hip-hop, music, rap, and other skills that they can pick up. That's one opportunity that we can also tap into, and I think more collaboration between universities and schools, because that's definitely key. And as the pandemic has shown us, online schooling is the norm and is the future. So there's a lot more on that front that offers opportunities rather than challenges. And I can give you some examples of homegrown companies here in Dubai that are doing great work across the community. So Kareem, which was bought over by Uber, it's a ride-sharing app. It has launched in Pakistan and employs women drivers. It's also launching digital payments, which of course has implications on remittances. And then Noon.com is an e-commerce platform, and the CEO of that is a boy who grew up in Delhi and who's now one of the youth leaders here and foremost entrepreneurs that is offering opportunities to youth across countries and ages. So I think, to give you an example, just this month, the UAE invited the world to share their views on how young people can contribute and implement sustainable development goals. So I think while work is being done, I don't think anyone will ever say that there's not a lot more to be done. And I think with the rest of the world going online now, it just gives us a lot more opportunities and makes it easier for us to collaborate.
So Aakanksha, if I can just ask you to respond very briefly. There is a lot happening individually at an individual level, perhaps. But do we have institutional capability to handle this at the moment, pan-region, or is it still being done bilaterally on an ad hoc basis at the moment?
I think it is more. It is, I think, done on an ad hoc basis, from my understanding, but. Again, because the diaspora is so strong, particularly in the UAE, and we know, the close ties the UAE and India share and the leadership share, and I think there are exchanges that are done, and the Indian consulate, I know here, works closely to ensure that the community does have more cultural exchanges and more economic ties as well, which all translates into the same end goal at the end of the day.
So Aaditya, over to you now for this last comment from the panel. We have touched upon so many issues, so many connections, so much potential, so many opportunities. Are we in India ready to tap into them? Are we looking at the big picture as concretely and cohesively as, say, Majed, Kwame, and Aakanksha have highlighted? They have all looked at their own domains, strategic, economic, cultural, and youth engagement. Are we, cognizant of this reality that there is a vacuum that needs to be filled, and India needs to take a lead, or say states in India like Maharashtra, Gujarat, and others can form an institutional mechanism and do something about it? And what, from a policy practitioner's perspective, what do you see are the challenges here when it comes to India, and in particular, say, if I were to ask you to take a lead, what do you think from a real-time issue? What would be the consequences? What would be the challenges that you would face in operationalizing these ideas that we have just mapped out?
As you've heard, all of us, all four of us actually spoke about the cultural ties, the history, probably some of the differences and a lot of opportunities that lie there. Mr. Majed also highlighted about the maritime routes, and one of the most important things in that, if you notice, even in the past and even today, if you see the ancient maritime routes, we were more than happy communicating with each other, trading with each other, and as a whole crescent, we never really found the need to look for a new world because we were self-sufficient within the region in the maritime routes that we had and the trade routes that we had over land and sea around this crescent. So I think we never thought as empires or countries to go looking for the new world or to look for America or to look, what is beyond us. I think that is very crucial, which gives us a huge pointer to what really we have to look forward to. This region can essentially be self-sufficient, providing to each other resources that are required to go further in the future that we are looking at as something which is new, as young, and beyond any borders or boundaries today in terms of ideologies or in terms of whatever divided us in the past. As as our friend Mr. Kwame said, that it's about also the larger part of Africa participating in this whole crescent, because when we look at the Arabian Sea and of course a part of the Indian Ocean, though not geographically and technically, we can see it as a bay which really connects us together and connects us as a crescent which we can really help each other move forward. Most of probably our political systems may vary from each other, our arbitrations, our regulations, our judicial systems may vary, but then our requirements, our needs for the current times and for the future, like I said initially, are the same. And then as Aakanksha also said that, our younger generation, the generation of, someone like me, I'm just 30, and we look at a shared future. When I say a shared future, it's not necessarily being something like the EU where you're moving freely from one country to another. We'd obviously have whatever we hold true to ourselves, whatever we hold closer to our hearts, however we've been brought up as a culture, as a city, as a country, we'll be remaining like that. And probably that is also good or bad, and that's up to each of us to see it like that. But more of interactions, more of interventions, more of cooperation, more of coordination, more of coexisting, understanding each other. I think that is very important. What we need to take out of our mind is probably the fact that I can change you or you can change me, or I'm better than you, you're better than me. I think here, if we start realizing that each of us is good in our own way and we can help each other to grow further, I think that is where we can really take the lead. India as a country, of course, we also look at ourselves as unity in diversity. We have many states, we've got many cultures, religions, regions, languages, castes, creeds coming together, and of course being the epitome of staying together, united for more than 70 years. I think today, if I speak of one country taking the lead, of course I would be happy as a country, as as someone from India, to be taking the lead, but I think each of us have our own strengths and each of us can take a lead together. It's about cooperation in today's times. I think it's about building a platform for all of us to interact really and to look at what we can give each other, what we can take from each other for a better future ahead. I think that is very crucial.
Thank you all. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I think one of the first of its kind that at least I have attended, where we have had representation from various parts of the Arabian Sea community, and we have started to think about more constructively what potentially the region can and cannot do. One thing is very clear, that there are divergences and there are challenges, but there are also opportunities which can be tapped into, and perhaps greater institutionalization of such dialogues of this kind of an architecture is the need of the hour, given the enormous shifts that are happening both within the Arabian Sea framework as well as beyond. I think the community will have to come up faster, will have to be more decisive in its interventions, and it will have to work together if some of the regional challenges have to be tackled more proactively. So with that, thank you all for joining us today from various parts of the world, and thank you all for joining the Raisina dialogue this year. Thank you.